2.5 billion people eat street food every single day. That is nearly 1 in 3 humans on the planet choosing a roadside stall, a cart, or an open-air kitchen over everything else available to them. And the reason this number keeps growing, decade after decade, is not what most food historians will ever tell you. In the next 10 minutes, you are going to discover how street food became the most powerful culinary force in human history, why emperors and kings secretly preferred it over palace banquets, and the one country that accidentally invented a street food tradition that now feeds half the world. We will travel through ancient Rome, medieval Asia, colonial Latin America, and the streets of modern-day Tokyo and Lagos. And we will uncover the surprising truth about why street food is not just food, it is a mirror held up to every civilization that ever existed. Let us start at the very beginning. The moment human beings first gathered in cities, street food followed. Archaeologists excavating the ruins of Pompeii discovered over 80 thermopolia, ancient fast food counters built directly into the stone walls of the city. These were not casual setups. They had terracotta pots embedded in masonry counters, keeping stews and grains warm throughout the day. Chemical analysis of residue found inside those pots revealed evidence of duck, pork, fish, legumes, and wine-based sauces. The Romans were not eating homemade meals twice a day. Most Roman citizens lived in apartments called insulae, which had no kitchens at all. Street food was not a convenience for them. It was survival. This pattern repeated itself across every major ancient civilization. In the markets of ancient China during the Tang dynasty, vendors sold noodle soups and roasted meats along the Grand Canal routes. In ancient Egypt, flatbreads cooked over open fires fed laborers building monuments that still stand today. Street food has always existed wherever large populations gathered, because feeding a city requires a system outside the home. But here's what nobody talks about when it comes to street food history. The foods we now consider the most sophisticated, the most refined, the most celebrated in fine dining, almost all of them started on the street. Ramen, now served in restaurants that hold Michelin stars, was post-war Japanese street food sold from push carts by vendors who were mostly Chinese immigrants navigating an economy destroyed by conflict. Ceviche, now a symbol of Peruvian national identity and a dish found in upscale restaurants on every continent, was sold by fishermen on the coasts of Peru centuries before it ever touched a white tablecloth. The street is where food evolves. When a cook has no walls, no roof, and no margin for waste, creativity becomes the only tool available. Constraints produce innovation, and innovation produces the dishes that define entire cultures. Move forward through history to the medieval period, and street food becomes even more fascinating. In medieval London, vendors called costermongers sold fruits and vegetables from carts and baskets, crying their wares through the narrow streets. But beyond simple produce, the streets offered roasted meats, hot pies, and something called a pastry crust used not as food itself but as a container. Workers would buy a filled pastry, eat the filling, and discard the thick outer shell. Over generations, the shell became thinner and more edible, and the modern pie was born, directly from a cost-cutting measure on a medieval street corner. In the same era across Asia, the Silk Road created one of the greatest street food cross-pollination events in history. Merchants traveling between China, Persia, India, and eventually Europe brought spices, cooking techniques, and ingredients that mixed and merged at every trading post. The concept of marinating meat in yogurt and spices, which forms the backbone of tandoor cooking and modern shawarma, traveled along those roads carried not by chefs but by travelers who needed portable, preserved food that could be cooked over a simple open fire at the end of a long journey. By the time European colonialism began reshaping the world in the 15th and 16th centuries, street food had become a vehicle for cultural survival. In colonial Mexico, indigenous women set up market stalls selling tamales, tlayudas, and atole despite Spanish authorities repeatedly trying to shut them down. These women were not just feeding people. They were preserving a culinary tradition that colonial power actively tried to erase. The street food market became an act of resistance. And it worked. Those dishes survived, evolved, and now define Mexican cuisine globally. The same story played out in West Africa, in Southeast Asia, in the Caribbean. Enslaved and colonized people used public food preparation as one of the few spaces where cultural memory could be maintained. The street was ungovernable in ways that homes and plantations were not. And so the food of resistance became the food of the people, and eventually the food of the world. Consider this number: the global street food market was valued at approximately $630 billion in 2023. It is projected to reach $1.2 trillion by 2030. That growth is not being driven by novelty. It is being driven by the fact that this is how most of the world has always eaten, and modernization has not changed that fundamental truth. It has only made it visible to the economies that previously ignored it. Now here is where the story gets genuinely counterintuitive. Street food does not just reflect poverty or necessity. In many of the world's most food-sophisticated cities, it reflects the highest form of culinary mastery available. In Bangkok, Thailand, a city of over 10 million people, more than half the population eats street food daily. The Thai government has actually listed street food preservation as a cultural heritage priority, because the knowledge held by street vendors, the balance of sweet, sour, salty, and spicy that defines authentic pad thai, som tam, or boat noodles, is generational knowledge that takes decades to develop. A trained chef in a five-star hotel kitchen cannot replicate it overnight. JFAI, a street food cook in Bangkok, earned a Michelin star while cooking on the sidewalk in front of her shopfront, using charcoal and a wok that she has been working over for 40 years. She wears ski goggles to protect her eyes from the flames. She charges $40 for a crab omelette. Her waiting list is months long. She refused to move indoors. The street, for her, is not a limitation. It is the source of everything. But here is another pattern that shapes this history in ways that deserve serious attention. Street food has always been one of the most reliable economic ladders available to people with limited capital but abundant skill. In cities like Lagos, Nairobi, Mumbai, and Mexico City, the informal food economy provides livelihoods for millions of people who have no access to formal employment. A woman selling jollof rice from a pot in Lagos is not operating at the margins of the economy. She is the economy for the people around her. Studies by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations estimate that street food contributes to the caloric intake of urban populations in developing countries at rates exceeding 50% in many regions. The street food vendor is also one of the world's most underacknowledged food scientists. Operating without refrigeration, without timers, without precise measurements, these cooks develop sensory systems for doneness, seasoning, texture, and timing that formal culinary education rarely matches. They taste constantly. They adjust constantly. Their feedback loop is immediate, because the customer is standing right there. Today, street food tourism has become one of the fastest-growing segments of the travel industry. Platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok have created global audiences for videos shot on sidewalks in Vietnam, carts in Istanbul, and night markets in Taiwan. What was once invisible to the travel industry is now the reason people book flights. The history of street food is ultimately the history of human ingenuity under pressure. It is the story of civilizations building themselves one meal at a time, in the open air, for whoever is hungry. It started on the streets of Pompeii 2,000 years ago. It survived empires, colonialism, wars, and economic collapse. It fed laborers who built wonders of the ancient world. It preserved cultures that powerful forces tried to erase. And today it feeds 2.5 billion people before noon. Every bite of street food you have ever eaten carries that entire history in it. That is not a small thing. That is the whole world on a plate. Before you go, if you learned something new today, hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel grow. Subscribe to Flavor Vault for a new video every single day. We will see you in the next one.